Russell French from Energetic Consulting. I'm an expert in solar power and renewable energy, been in the industry for 17 years. I'm an electrician of almost 25 years, and I coach solar power businesses, how to run their business. I teach them how to do sales, I train them on sales, I do marketing, and I also do technical analysis of solar power systems and strategy for big manufacturing businesses in solar power. It's been asked of me to share how sustainable is it to actually install solar power systems. Obviously, a lot of energy goes into the components that make up a solar power system, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And is it a good investment? Is there a return on the investment for the money that's put into solar? And is it good for the environment, ultimately? So a couple of things. Firstly, the embodied energy that goes into the solar power system. So we're talking about the solar panels on the roof, so the aluminium frames, the silicon cells, the wafers, the glass. Then on the inverter boxes, so the control units, there's a lot of electronic components, transistors, diodes. There's a whole bunch of different things in the inverters themselves. And there's other various aluminium products like the railing that the solar panels sit on, so the mounting system, and then the balance of system componentry. So from an embodied energy point of view, meaning how much energy does it take, often from a coal-fired power station, to create aluminium. Aluminium is extremely energy intensive to create the mounting structures that the solar panels sit on, the frames. It actually takes a lot of energy. And then you have the silicon. So silicon basically comes from sand. There's a whole vertical integration process to take it from like a sand form into a silicon ingot, into a wafer, into the final silicon cell. And when we look at the entire solar panel, often the embodied energy could take, it varies between products, but it could take like say 18 months to pay that back. That's a round figure that's often used. Okay, so 18 months. Often it's 12 months actually for many solar panels these days. But when we look at the design life, those panels are designed to last for 25 years. That's the design life, and some are actually designed for and warranted for 30 years. Okay, so yes, it takes 1 year to get past the embodied energy from coal-fired power, and it's not always coal-fired power, often it's carbon offset, to make the aluminium. And then the silicon as well, is an energy intensive process. But again, if that takes 1 year, 18 months, okay, that's a bit of an investment to have a long-term gain. And the same with all the electronic components. Yes, there can be some rare metals that go into some various diodes and transistors, etc. But all of those components are recyclable. Now in Australia, we have the PV Recycling Centre that can recycle the solar panels, and yes, you can recycle electronic components as well. So a lot of that is then reused, recycled, reused. So that's something to do with the embodied energy. So from those of us in the industry that are experts in the field and of all walks of life, including professors at the University of New South Wales, which I've lectured at the University of New South Wales, which is one of the world's leading research laboratories and, universities that does research for commercial industry, often is commissioned to do commercial projects. It's well understood that, yes, maybe some small sacrifices have to be made early, but to basically protect our planet. So we all know that climate change is real, global warming is occurring at a rapid rate. We've never seen such increases in carbon emissions and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, which is thickening the layer of our atmosphere. So we need to do something. So a solar system does pay itself back. Now, from a financial investment point of view into a solar power system, it pays itself back typically anywhere between, let's say, 3 years and 5 years. That's the typical payoff of the cash that has to be spent on a solar power system. Now, sometimes it's less. Sometimes you can get that down to 2 years, for sure. But we know it's a 25-year investment. Now, we look at what's called levelized cost of energy, which is how often do we need to replace components in the solar power system, such as what's the first component that needs to be replaced, and over a 25-year design life of a solar power system, what's the true cost of the system by having to replace components along the way? Because let's face it, electronics and electrical components wear out due to heat. and even like direct impact from UV destabilization, if they're out in the sun. So the first thing that fails is the inverter, and that's typically around 12, or it could be anywhere from 8 to 15 years, but it's typically 12 to 15 years. And now that's the first thing that will fail. And I have to say everything else doesn't, right? So all the balance of system components, circuit breakers, isolators, all that kind of stuff, the mounting structures, the solar panels themselves, the cabling is designed for basically 25 years. You only really have to place the inverter once at probably year 15, and then you get another 10 years out of that, and then you're at your 25 years. So it's a really amazing investment. So your return on investment, now if you invest money into the bank, let's say you take $10,000 and you put it in a bank account, you're probably going to earn, 1% interest, 1.3, whatever it is these days, it's very low, or a term deposit. If you put that into a solar power system, and it's very easy to work out the return on investment because we look at the income that essentially the solar power system is producing, or reducing the reliance on the grid. So you're self-consuming what you're generating from the sun, so photon energy hitting the solar cells and creating electron flow, which creates free energy. So basically you get 20% return on investment as a rough figure. 20% return on investment as opposed to 1% in a bank. And then you can do your internal rate of return, your net present value, or your financial calculations to say, is this a good financial investment from a financial point of view? Clearly, it's a ridiculously good financial investment. The only thing is, how long are you going to stay at the home for, or the commercial premises? Are you going to leave within 5 years? Is it still a good investment? Well, it is, because then you've raised the capital value of the property that the solar power system is installed on, and it's an asset, right? And these days, it's well understood, like Australia has the largest residential solar power market in the world. This is the most competitive market in the entire world right here in Australia. At one stage, there was over 500, actually to be precise, 459 solar panel manufacturers, and most of them were targeting Australia. It's the most competitive market in the world. Often in the US, they pay 5 times the amount for a residential solar power system than they do right here. And right now, we have about 2.6 million rooftop solar power systems installed, which is the highest penetration market in the world. And we have the largest residential market in the world. It's incredible, right? So often people say the Australian government's not doing enough, and I would also argue that, but there's many things that have happened which are very good, and the residential market is thriving. There's often, in like Queensland, we're up to almost I think it's pushing towards 40% owner-occupied dwelling penetration rates of those premises having solar power installed now. And in Victoria, it's like 20-odd%, and so on around the States. I think the Australian average is something in the 20-odd% range, 22, something like that. Owner-occupied dwellings. So it's an incredible investment. There is a lot of activity happening. Utility solar systems are getting installed, although yes, the government has pulled some of that subsidy in the LGC certificates, or the large-scale certificates for those utility-scale projects. Commercial projects up to 100 kilowatt have a lot of support still, which will get scaled back by the year 2030. Once we go over 100 kilowatt of system size, which is a large system, the subsidies disappear. But there's a lot happening. So I just wanted to share with you why renewable energy is an incredible investment. Clean energy, no emissions, it's static, extremely low maintenance. I know solar systems that I haven't had to touch in 12 years since I installed it. Not once have I had to even touch it, nothing, zero. So that's incredible from a maintenance point of view. It's directly impacting global warming, because instead of having to take from, like in New South Wales, we use brown coal, in Victoria we use black coal. Basically, one is dirtier than the other because there's more water in it. We have to extract that. Instead of having to use that dirty, polluting energy, we can take it from clean solar, baby, right from the sun. Photon energy, and the systems work. 100% they work. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. They work. They're so reliable. So it's an amazing investment. Better than wind for residential. Wind is extremely turbulent. So wind turbines shake houses loose. They get turbulence off other buildings. It's not great for residential or commercial premises. They need paddocks. That's why you see the big wind turbines out in rural, regional areas. There's other things that we can do for our home, like energy efficiency, installing LED lights, which you take like an old halogen light compared to an LED light, and it's chalk and cheese. Like the old halogens, which have been banned now, were 95% heat, 5% light. The LEDs are so much more efficient and last like 5 times as long. We can do that. And there's lots of other things you can do around your home, like draft stopping. So even like a 5mm gap under a door, letting a draft through from outside, is considered a really large gap, which then often increases the need for heating and cooling air conditioning. 5mm doesn't seem like much, but that's a large gap. 10mm is massive. Even a couple of millimeters is still considered reasonable. Put draft stoppers in, the little flaps that you can get from Bunnings on the doors, put all that in. Good insulation is still one of the best things that you can do. Put that in the roof. If it's possible, put it in the walls. If ever we get a chance to design an energy efficient home, there's so many passive, wonderful things that we can do in our homes to passively design the home for passive cooling, airflow through the home, louvers on windows at the right time of the year, let the sun through, eaves which block the intense summer heat but let the winter sun angle through. So many things. So I'm clearly passionate about this. I better stop there because I could go on for another half an hour. Thanks.